Now, as for your objection to the first premise here, you seem to concede my definition of beginning to exist, because when you gave like two arguments, then you conceded and moved on to the next, gave an argument, then conceded my point, moved on to your final objection, which was, of course, Dan Barker's objection to the argument in his book Godless, namely that the Kalam argument begs the question here. Now, okay, first of all, let's talk about this here. What does it mean to beg the question? Begging the question here is when your only reason for believing a premise is if you already assume the conclusion, okay? Now, take the premise, whatever begins to exist as a cause. There's nothing about that statement that supposes that the universe has a cause. It's not synonymous with that at all. And now I'll have two links here. There's one is an audio clip of Dr. Craig talking about this, and there's another one where it was in a question of the week. Somebody posed to him Dan Barker's objection like you described it here, which I will quote at length here. But I would also recommend you read the full thing, as I'll have linked in the description section. So I'll just read a section of it, quoted at length here. Quote, "Now as for the claim that if God is the sole member of the class of things that don't begin to exist, then everything that begins to exist as a cause becomes synonymous with God, this is just a confusion of meaning and reference. If God is the only member of the class of beginningless things, then the two expressions have the same referent, that is to say they pick out the same object, but that in no way shows that the two expressions have the same meaning. If they did, then in knowing one statement to be true, you would know the other to be true and well, which is obviously not the case. Finally, it seems to me that Barker is taking his substitute premise as an existential statement. He seems to think that it commits us to the existence of beings that begin to exist and to God, which he thinks begs the question of God's existence. This is to fail to understand his own premise. The there are at most commits us to the existence of classes, or as he puts it, categories, but the class of things that are beginningless could be empty, so there's no commitment to God's existence. In any case, if there were such a commitment, adding one extra member to the class wouldn't make the premise any less question-begging, since you'd still be presupposing God's existence. I think that there are in his premise is just a rhetorical device. The premise should be understood as the claim that everything either has a beginning or it does not. This is what is called a universally quantified statement, and as such, it makes no existential commitments." End quote. If there are any good objections, by the way, and you can read his entire response to that question, I have it linked in the description section, but if there are any good objections to the Kalam cosmological argument, rest assured, this is not one of them here, okay? Now, in response to the infinity argument for the beginning of the universe, here you seem to have misunderstood what the argument is. So, to avoid confusion, let me just present it to you in a syllogistic form here, which I will have written down in the description section here. Premise 1. A collection formed by successive addition cannot be actually infinite. 2. The temporal series of events is a collection formed by successive addition. Therefore, the temporal series of events cannot be actually infinite. Now, when I say successive addition, I mean adding one member to another, right? Which is how the past would be, because how did today arrive, right? Well, in order for today to arrive, yesterday would have to arrive. But before yesterday could arrive, the day before that would have to arrive, and so on and so forth, and you keep getting driven back into the past to where if there are an infinite number of days, nothing. I mean, today would have never arrived, but clearly it has, so, therefore the past cannot be infinite. And to better explain this, what I meant by the counting to infinity thing here, it's not, you said that if we had an infinite amount of time, we'd be able to do it. It's not about having an infinite amount of time. You can have an infinite amount of time available to you to count to infinity, but the problem is you'll just never reach infinity. If I start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, I will never get to infinity, because I can always add an extra number to that. There will never be a point at which I will have completed an infinite. And then the point of that illustration is to then flip it around, that if you cannot count to infinity, how can you count down from infinity? If the series can't get started, you can't get to today. The best analogy to this is saying getting from an infinite past with no beginning to today is like jumping out of a bottomless pit. That's the argument basically in a nutshell right there. And I find your attempt to sort of hand wave it off. Like, that doesn't really matter. Really odd. And I should also note, by the way, that this is different from the other argument. The other argument Craig gives is just an argument against the general impossibility of actual infinites. This argument, though, for all this argument is concerned, infinities could exist, but you just can't form one by adding one member to another. So I hope I've made that argument clear enough to you, and you can't just brush it, sweep it under the rug like it doesn't matter, because if the two premises I gave are sound, it logically follows that the universe had a beginning here, and you need to address that. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you just can't, appeal the mystery by saying, well, it doesn't matter, we just don't know if the universe began to exist. And of course, I'm not entirely sure what quantum events have to do with this argument, but whatever, though. So, yeah. Hopefully now that that I've hopefully more clearly presented this argument, maybe you can give a better response to this in what I hope will be, I hope you do make a video response to this video, by the way. So, hopefully in your next response, you might be able to properly respond to this argument here. Now, in the final part of your video, you then criticized my definition of the use of nothing, saying that I should use what cosmologists use, and you gave me a link to a video, Universe from Nothing. I did watch it. Well, I didn't really watch the Q&A for the video, but I did watch the lecture, though. Interesting lecture, though it didn't really tell me much that I didn't already know. I mean, I know what some of these people mean when they say nothing. They mean, like, basically they're talking about empty space or a quantum vacuum. But here's the thing that I must be crystal clear on this here. That is not what I'm defending here. And I find it interesting also that you said, I shouldn't be using a made-up definition or ones that theologians use. Here's the thing. The definition of nothing that I'm using, meaning non-being, okay, this is how it's traditionally been described. This view of nothing goes back to people like Aristotle. So it's not just this religious thing. This is how nothing is traditionally understood here. And, simply saying, well, this is how cosmologists use it, so therefore that's how you have to say it, though, doesn't change anything. It misses the point. That's not what I'm defending. When I say the universe began to exist from nothing, from non-being, that's what I'm defending. And in order to refute that, you would have to refute the arguments for the second premise here, okay? But that's just what I'm defending. I'm defending the view that the universe came from nothing, not a quantum vacuum. A quantum vacuum is not nothing. I'm sorry, but it's just not. Now, there was one part of the video, though, that you linked me that I found very interesting, and I think perfectly illustrates the sort of equivocation that's going on here. I really don't have the patience to download the whole video just so I can show the clips, so we're just going to hear an audio from that here, and that's this.
And it could have begun from nothing. And I've written a piece, although of course I got a lot of hate mail, saying that in my mind this answers this crazy question that religious people always keep throwing out, which is, why is there something rather than nothing? The answer is there had to be. If you have nothing in quantum mechanics, you'll always get something. It's that simple.
Okay, so what was the problem with that? Now, first of all, I know this does delve a little bit into a different argument, because the question, why is there something rather than nothing, really has more to do with the Leibnizian cosmological argument. But the problem with that is, I think, perfectly illustrates what's going on between us here. Because when the religious believer, or whoever it may be, anybody, doesn't have to be religious, asks the question, why is there something rather than nothing, what we are asking is, why does anything exist at all? That includes a quantum vacuum, because a quantum vacuum is something. It has properties, okay? And his answer by saying that, oh, well, quantum, if a quantum vacuum just inevitably produces a universe, is to commit the fallacy of equivocation. He's equivocating. He misses the point that's being asked by that question here. So, in conclusion, thanks for the video response. I've really been enjoying this discussion so far. It's been a great mental exercise for me, and so I'm curious if you make a video response to this, that would be interesting. I'd be curious to see what you'd have to say to this stuff now that I've hopefully better presented my thoughts here on this matter. So yes, take care.